Hi beautiful people. I wanted to change the format a bit on this channel with this video. While I intend on doing commentary style videos sprinkled with memes and humor, I thought it would be cool to dive into the history of certain topics. This video is inspired by Modern Girls and Mina Lay, who are known for doing videos on fashion history with commentary on new trends. Here are some of my favorite videos from both of them respectively. This week's episode is going to be about photocard collecting, the history of where it came from, the psychology of it, and the critiques on collecting PCs today. I know we live in a modern era where an idol takes a photo with a plush animal and the crowd goes wild, but the idea of collecting photocards with things on them has existed for quite some time now. In the 1600s, trade cards were introduced as a way to stiffen the packaging of cigarette boxes. They were extremely popular in business and cities like Paris and London, where these would pass around as business cards to advertise products to potential customers like furniture or stationery. Some of these Victorian trade cards would be blank in the back so that the person carrying it would stamp their logo to advertise their services. It would become more focused on baseball in the 1860s after the sport became professional, in which it would be usually sold through tobacco products or packets of gum. This is also at the time when it was colorized as well under colored lithography, and it would be extremely detailed and colorful. This was also where people began to collect them as collectibles and putting them in albums or scrapbooks. While the first sports and trading cards are for debate today, many believe that the 1886 N167 Old Judge Pack by Goodwin Tobacco was the first official trading card to ever exist, with it featuring a sports and or movie celebrity on them. It was black and white, with Old Judge featured on the top of the card, followed by a pretty accurate portrait of the player. Eventually, movie stars began to appear in the 1950s trading cards, and eventually in 1952, the modern trading card with an athlete, their bio, and stats would be created, and now is the standard for all trading cards. Trading cards would be popular up until the trading card games became a thing in the 1990s, in which people would purchase a pack in order to battle against their friends and other opponents. Sports cards have changed in size and popularity over the decades since then, but some of them range from being extremely valuable to being worth absolutely too little to nothing. I'll get into the psychology as to why people collect so many cards in the second part of the video, but there are several times in history in which people have dug through their old collections only to realize that they have a bunch of collectible items that they could sell for very high prices. The modern K-pop photocard was created by none other than SM Entertainment. While officially the first PC set was from 2010's Girls' Generation's second album, Oh, the first instance of a K-pop group having photocards was in 2007 by TVXQ during the release of their Japanese album Summer. Photocards were created for the sole purpose of making money off of physical copies because people would have to buy multiple copies in order to complete a set of the photocards. CDs were also created as collectibles, which is why K-pop albums are almost never a simple jewel case unlike other music markets. This is in order to keep physical copies from dipping in popularity later on. Fun fact, physical sales are also used to determine the size of the fandom. Today we have photocards from quite literally everything from pre-ordering the album at specific times, pre-ordering or purchasing from specific stores, different versions of the same album, attending events like concerts or fan meetings, and all kinds of different merch ranging from bookmarks, stationery items, and the like. It can be quite difficult to go through all the different types of photocards out there, but if you guys wanted me to do a tutorial on how to collect photocards, please let me know in the comments down below. Now, there hasn't been a lot of research on the psychological effects of collecting photocards specifically, but there have been studies on blind box items and sports trading cards. K-pop photocards combine the thrill of blind box items and the collectability factor of sports trading cards. The photocard actually used to be kind of more of a fun surprise and used as an accessory, whether it's shown in the back of a clear phone case of somebody's or just left in the walls for display. It wasn't until the pandemic began when the boom of the photocard collecting started, similar to how NBA cards also got their own renaissance. On one hand, you're already purchasing the K-pop album, a collectible item. This is different from your usual non-K-pop albums where you usually get a lyric sheet and the CD itself in a jeweled case. Albums can be purchased anywhere, although for most, they buy multiple copies in order to get different photo cards or pre-order benefit cards or POBs. In fact, there's a whole ritual in the way how people collect K-pop albums and doing unboxings, as you not only get two things that I mentioned before, but also photo cards, bookmarks, stickers, and other stationery items that you could use later on. There's also a reasonable chance that these would go out of print in the near future, making these albums really rare and worth actually more than you had originally bought them for. In fact, most people who buy K-pop albums generally don't know what the contents are inside. There are multiple versions of each album, in which each album version has a concept and its own set of photo cards. This creates a blind box effect in which the customer doesn't know exactly what they're going to get initially. It then prompts the buyer to buy more copies, whether it's to complete the album versions or specifically collect all the photo cards that are present. Some people tend to also get this thing called a template, in which there are multiple different versions all spread out so they can be able to keep track of how many different cards they have, whether they have duplicates or they have something missing. According to a study done by Sichuan Agricultural University, a blind box item invokes feelings of extreme excitement for those who have purchased a product. These people are most likely to have a higher loyalty towards the product, positive word of mouth, and a willingness to buy again. There's a certain type of cheap thrill that comes out from purchasing these items, in addition to believing in that whatever items that in our case, the photo cards you pull can create more value for yourself. Whether we like to admit it or not, we tend to put value in our collections from how many rare cards we have to how many cards we actually have in our possessions. There's an emotional attachment already as it is from purchasing an album, as the person is not only getting it for the blind box effect, but also to support their favorite artist, something akin to a sports fan attending games to support their favorite team. Buying an album is one of the cheapest and most affordable ways in comparison to buying endless amount of merch or going to a concert, and it allows people to feel included without breaking the bank. Now, there has been a lot of different criticisms over the years on photocard collecting, as is with every other collecting community. I will gladly go over some of the things that I have looked at since then, and you guys can let me in the comments as to if there's any more type of criticisms that you guys may or may not have. The first one is reselling price. The more limited the photo card is, the more likely the chance of people either keeping the card when they pull it, otherwise known as pulls, or reselling it for a higher price. This has been a subject of controversy on the pure fact that these photo cards come as free inclusions when you buy an album. However, some justify it as, well, most of these higher selling cards tend to be priced directly from the person, and in order to make a profit, they would have to price it higher when they were to resell it. The second is member pricing. Now, this is a relatively extremely controversial opinion, particularly in fandoms where the difference is pretty large. For example, I collect Jungkook of BTS, and I've actually personally have noticed how a JK card tends to be much higher in price versus someone from the rap line. While some have argued that it enforces the idea that certain members are worth more than their popularity, others argue that popularity creates a real scarcity because they're more likely to keep their favorite member, which is depending again in popularity. One of my friends noted that she priced Jungkook higher, for example, because she bought most of her JK cards and didn't pull him, which I think is pretty justifiable. I mean, we don't actually really know exactly the ratio of like how many cards are actually distributed out there. However, if this seems to be like really not that many JK cards out there, it would make more sense to price them a little bit higher in order to go with the market. However, I very much do believe that member pricing should not exist because it again reinforces the idea that some members are worth more than others, which is pretty fucked up if you ask me. There's also a handful of people that are very willing to scam. I had a friend that was scammed out of $50 for collecting a Blu-ray JK, and I was nearly scammed over a PC myself as well. I think it's also important that despite that there's a real camaraderie between sellers, it's important to practice caution and watch where the market is. For example, I tend to only trade or buy from proxy sites rather than directly from smaller accounts, as proxy services tend to have that reputation of being reliable. I also trust group order managers more or GOMs. More importantly, I live in the LA metro, so it's pretty easy to find people to trade with versus like having to go through the mail, making sure things are stamped, making sure things are coming in and things like that. The fourth is value. Because these come as a part of album inclusions, one would think that it's ridiculous to buy photocards or even purchase extra copies of the set album in order to complete the set. By the basic rule of supply and demand, the more cards there are, usually the lower the value of the card is overall. Like, for example, if you buy, say, 5 copies of the same album and there's 3 million copies in circulation, you would think that there's 3 million copies, or 3 million divided by how many copies there are, like, per member. It really kind of makes it seem like there's a lot of different cards out there, which makes the price of it go lower. Whereas, like, for example, if you're going to a fan meeting, there's only 700 people in attendance and it's divided by 7, there's only 100 of those available, making it extremely expensive. So it kind of is supply and demand, but at the same time, it's also very arbitrary. And some people do argue that the fact that the value is pretty random, but honestly, so are prices on art pieces. Like, we don't really sit there and look at like a piece of Van Gogh and be like, oh my god, this is totally worth like $100 million based on the composition and like things like that. It's more so of like the literal value of how much you think it's worth. And I think that it's pretty easy to judge people who collect photos of race selfies or something similar versus like spending a shit ton of money on getting a Murakami piece in your house. Collecting, I feel, is like nothing more than just a hobby, and while you can spend money on our Legos or photo cards, it doesn't really matter as long as it makes you pretty freaking happy, right? The fifth is freebies and packing culture. This is kind of more a TikTok specific criticism in which a few folks would quite literally spend a lot of time packaging one photo card by giving the receiver a bunch of candy, stickers, and other cards versus someone who has the worst packaging possible. Like, the photo card is bare and an envelope kind of bad. Then there's folks who don't really know how to package items, which I don't blame them because honestly, it's not like there's a tutorial that's accepted by the communities as a standard. There's also a conversation about classism and the way how some people don't necessarily can afford to restock on pretty aesthetic packaging, or else they'll get roasted by some asshole online who's upset that their photo card is a triple sleeve in a sea of Japanese candies and pink packing peanuts. Like, I mean, I would like to receive it as a gift, but the entire point of here is that I'm supposed to be here for the photo card, not necessarily the experience of opening a 90% freebie box. Number 6, overconsumption. I do feel this topic is something that we really don't like addressing, and as much as I believe, and I very much believe in this, I don't think that people should buy so many copies where they end up going to debt over, a point I'll get to in a second. And I've met several people who would buy a few hundred copies in an effort to get into fan calls and fan signs, only to be stuck with having to sell them. It sounds awfully familiar to an MLM, to where you can easily slip into having so much product that they cannot sell, which is another issue in and of itself. I've also seen quite a few people also go into debt by buying so many different things, and also when you add that on top of having concert tickets, it feels like you're drowning in debt. And it's really embarrassing to kind of see if someone is kind of like in that situation and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's like, it's your money, and if you choose to do what you want to do, you can. However, I do see the ecosystem of photocard trading has become getting better at this. I've seen people buy the people who buy multiple copies end up giving away cup sleeves, or they'll do like giveaways or something like that. Or for people who are super creative and scrappy, they may end up doing some sort of like collage making class or something like that, to where they make collages out of their extra albums. I know, for example, like, I am definitely the type of person who loves collecting free albums. If I could save like a good $20 to $30 from not buying an album, I don't really care. I'm the type of person who likes collecting albums as they are, because I love having physical media that can definitely play on the CD player, whatever. Call me old, but that's just how. But it relatively saves me a good chunk of money when I don't have to buy them at every chance I get. So it's really nice. And also, like, I'm a very creative person, so if I want to do collages, I can just get some free copies and be able to like make cute little collages that can like put as a part of my home decor, so it's relatively nice. For example, I've collected at least like 10 different albums for free in the past 6 months to the very generous donation box that is K-Place, and it's been cutting costs like for me myself. Lastly, number 7, completeness and the competitive nature around it. I think this is the biggest and fair criticism that I have for photocards, and it's a really real struggle and stress in collecting everything. Although your collection is your own, you should never compare yourself to others. It's really easy to scroll through TikTok and Instagram to find someone showing off their 5 full binders of your favorite bias and K-pop shelves that are filled to the brim with their favorite items. I definitely have seen quite a lot of people who show off their big ass collections, and it can feel really intimidating because at the same time, like, your collection is pretty small and it feels like you're not big enough of a fan compared to these people who have like wall to wall of like your favorite group and stuff like that. I know this is pretty prevalent in the ARMY fandom whenever, like, I think collectorgrams have been a really huge thing in that fandom, to where you do challenges by showing your favorite photo card or your favorite merch or something that like pretty much shows off your entire house filled with this collection. And it can be really depressing because you're like, damn, like, I'm not that big of a fan compared to this person. Well, that's not true, because it doesn't really matter how much merch you were to collect. All it matters is that you're a fan of this group, and you should never really be able to compare yourself to other people just because this person has more than they do, especially if this person goes to concerts as well. It also not only like makes you feel awful, it also establishes a hierarchy in which nobody asks, and frankly no one is above other fans, as we're just all just fans at the end of the day. Whether you're collecting because you love seeing the cutest selfies of your bias, or you're here for the thrill, I hope that you guys are distraught when your collections aren't as full with rare cards as your friends or other people online. As I already said, your collection is for you and for you only, and you should always go at a pace where you feel like it. If you feel like you're getting too caught up in the drama, or you're realizing that you're spending way too much money than you need, don't be afraid to scale back and see if you can downsize. After all, our spaces are limited in terms of what we can store, so be smart and be wise. What are your favorite photo cards of your collection? Is there a photo card that you've been dying to collect? Leave your comments down below. For me, my favorite card at the moment is the Scar Yoongi that is a Target exclusive. And call me insane, but I would like to collect the whole Butterful collection just to hold a mutual aid auction over them. That would be really cool, right? Anyways, that's it for now. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.